So the only real way to understand what's happened to a brain after years of trauma is to study it pathologically, because chronic traumatic encephalopathy is not a disease we know how to diagnose in living people yet. And so it's my job to track down brains for study. And that means when any athlete passes away, I'm trying, and I hear about it, I'm trying to find a phone number of the family, usually within 48 hours, to try to find a way to ask them to donate the brain, like a tissue donation, an organ donation, for research. We've been successful 105 times, and so about half those are football players. We have military veterans, we have boxers and ice hockey players. Over 35 former NFL players are now in the brain bank. And the idea is that Dr. Ann McKee runs a number of tests on them to look for any abnormalities and to make sure that we do a clinical pathological correlation to what were they like, and then what do we find in their brain, and how can that teach us. And so when I call families, I'm asking them, for their loved one's brain. It's a very difficult conversation, especially because I'm not the person people want to hear from when they lose their father or lose their husband or lose their children. It's amazing to see. It's much easier, not amazing, it's not surprising, that if somebody's older, the family's more likely to do it, but if a parent losing a child, it's too emotionally volatile that they usually aren't thinking about long term, and they're usually not, so the idea is the pitch is that we're trying to figure out how to make sports safer for kids. We're trying to understand how we can help the people that we've already damaged, so we can find a way to diagnose it and eventually treat it. And it's amazing that most families are fully supportive of what we're doing. When if we get a hold of them, I would say half of them agree to do it. Trouble is getting a hold of them and actually having that one-on-one conversation, because people are protective of them. Oh, they're not going to want to hear from you, but usually they do. And sometimes there's religious reasons or other ones where they say no, but I'm amazed that we hear so many yeses, and people now call us. I don't even have to call people. Probably 20 or so families have called us from the hospice or from the hospital saying we know about the work, and we've talked about it, and we want to help. And then the other job I have is partially because at the beginning I was tired of calling widows, is we sign people up in advance, and then now we actually have a longitudinal study, a phone call once a year, and updating what they're like, so we can correlate that to what we find later on. So the youngest brain that we found CTE in was a 17-year-old named Nathan Stiles from Kansas, who actually died of second impact syndrome. So had a concussion, actually went to a doctor, was cleared by a doctor, but probably I think the concern is he was still having problems, or maybe even clearance wasn't enough. But he got hit, a soft hit that caused him to die, and his family gave us his brain, and he had signs of this disease already. Just a few focal little spots in his frontal lobes, but we found that consistently in these younger cases, and it's a pattern that you just don't find in any other disease. So you can even see it from a few spots, and we've also been understanding the brains of teenagers is key, because you can kind of get insights into what else is changing at the beginning, what's different about these athletes. And so we recently studied the brain of an 18-year-old named Austin Trenholm, and we found he didn't have CTE, but he did have a concussion 36 hours prior, and had multifocal axonal injury, and did end up committing suicide, and partially because people need to open up their eyes to the fact that these kids after concussion are different people, and they're going to behave differently, and are going to be emotionally volatile, and they're going to make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes are, criminal. Sometimes someone just told me a story about a kid stealing his car after concussion, but other times they can actually be permanent. So that's something we're trying to get people to think about, is that we need to really monitor these poor kids when they've had a brain injury, because they're going to be doing the wrong thing.